I was sitting in my corner office reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Watson, there are two people in the lobby asking for you. They say they're your mother and brother." My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. Megan and Jason. I hadn't seen or spoken to either of them in 3 years, not since I'd cut contact after they asked me to co-sign a loan for Jason's 5th failed business venture. "Did they say what they wanted?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too controlled, like I was acting in a play. "Just that it was important family business," Amanda replied, concern evident in her voice. She'd been my assistant for 2 years and had never seen a family member visit. I stared at the framed senior vice president plaque on my wall, still new enough that sometimes I'd catch sight of it and feel a small thrill. 6 months into my promotion, and the 6-figure salary that came with it. "I'll be down in a minute." I smoothed my charcoal pencil skirt, adjusted my silk blouse, and tried to calm my racing heart. How had they found me? Why now, after 3 years of blessed silence? I knew the answer before I'd even finished asking myself the question. Somehow they'd discovered my recent promotion. My success had always been like blood in the water for them. The elevator ride down the 14 floors felt simultaneously too short and endless. I used the time to armor myself in professionalism, straightening my shoulders, lifting my chin, preparing the pleasant but distant smile I used for difficult clients. When the doors opened to our marble-floored lobby, I spotted them immediately. Megan sat perched on one of the leather couches, her designer purse clutched tightly in her lap. At 62, she still maintained the carefully preserved beauty that had always been her armor. Highlighted blonde hair without a hint of gray makeup applied with precision, a stylish navy dress that likely cost more than she could afford. Beside her lounged Jason, all 32 years of him sprawled across the couch like he owned the place. He was loudly complaining to the receptionist about how the complimentary coffee tasted like dirt. His wrinkled button-down shirt had a visible stain near the collar, and his jeans looked like they'd been worn for a week straight. The receptionist, Rachel, caught my eye with visible relief. I didn't blame her. Jason had probably been making her life miserable for the past 15 minutes. Megan spotted me first. She stood immediately, her eyes sweeping over my tailored suit, my leather briefcase, the employee badge hanging around my neck. I could practically see her calculating dollar signs. "Emily, darling," she exclaimed, moving toward me with arms outstretched. Years of conditioning made me step forward and accept her embrace. She smelled like she always had. Expensive perfume with undertones of cigarettes she thought no one knew about. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. Calculated ones, but tears nonetheless. "You look wonderful," she said, her gaze continuing to appraise me. "Doesn't she look wonderful, Jason?" Jason finally stood, stretching lazily as though waking from a nap. "Yeah, sure. Real fancy." His tone suggested that fancy was a character flaw. I maintained my professional smile, acutely aware of Rachel and the other employees moving through the lobby. "What are you doing here? How did you find my office?" Megan's hand fluttered to her chest in practiced offense. "Is that any way to greet your mother? I raised you better than that." "No, you didn't," I thought. But I didn't say it. Not here, not in front of my colleagues. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Megan asked, her voice taking on that wounded tone I knew so well. I glanced at my watch. I had a meeting in 45 minutes with the marketing team. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down. I can give you 20 minutes. Jason snorted. 20 minutes? That's generous." I ignored him and led them out of the building. The October air was crisp, and I was grateful for it. It cleared my head a little as we walked in silence to the coffee shop, a place I frequented for working lunches. I prayed none of my colleagues would be there to witness whatever this was about to become. We were in luck. The mid-afternoon crowd hadn't arrived yet. I bought myself a green tea. Megan ordered the most expensive latte on the menu with extra modifications. Jason got 2 pastries and a large caramel monstrosity that was more dessert than coffee. I didn't offer to pay. Jason had to dig in his pockets for crumpled bills while I pretended not to notice his glare. We sat at a table in the back. I set my phone face up, started a timer, and said, 20 minutes. What do you want, E? Megan didn't waste time. "I saw your LinkedIn update. Congratulations on the promotion, by the way. You didn't tell us." "We don't talk, Mom. That was the agreement 3 years ago." "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? We're still family." Her emphasis on family was heavy with implication. Jason bit into his pastry, spraying crumbs across the table. "I always knew you'd do well, sis. You were always the smart one." This was a blatant lie. Jason had spent our childhood telling me I was stupid, ugly, and would never amount to anything. Our mother had never corrected him. In fact, she'd often agreed with him when it suited her. I didn't come here to discuss my career, I said, taking a sip of tea to hide my growing irritation. Of course not, honey. Megan leaned forward, her expression shifting to something more serious. I looked up what senior vice presidents make at your company. The range is quite impressive. There it was. My stomach tightened as 3 years of peace shattered around me. I didn't come here to discuss my salary either. Of course not, Megan continued smoothly. But since we're talking, Jason and I have been going through a rough patch financially. Jason nodded enthusiastically. Really rough. I took another sip of tea and waited. This was their show. I might as well let them perform it. Megan folded her hands on the table, her French manicured nails gleaming under the coffee shop lights. Jason has some credit card debt, nothing he can't handle eventually, but the interest is killing him. And I'm trying to build up my retirement fund. You know I don't have much saved. How much? I asked flatly. Megan brightened, mistaking my question for interest rather than the desire to get to the point. Well, we calculated that $50,000 would be perfect. $25,000 for Jason's cards and $25,000 for my retirement account. It's really very reasonable. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out sharp and bitter. $50,000, you want me to just give you $50,000? It's not that much for someone making what you make, Jason said, licking caramel off his fingers. You probably spend that much on shoes or whatever. I looked at my brother, this grown man who'd never held a job for more than 6 months, who'd burned through 5 business startups funded by our mother's money, who'd stolen from me more times than I could count. No, Megan blinked. What in? No, I'm not giving you $50,000. I'm not giving you 50. I'm not giving you anything. Jason's face reddened. Are you serious right now? Completely serious. I worked 2 jobs through college while you partied on Mom's dime. I turned to Megan. I paid my own tuition with scholarships and student loans that I just finished paying off last year. I got where I am with no help from either of you. Megan's tears returned, but this time they looked more real. Angry tears. How can you be so selfish after everything we did for you? What did you do for me, Mom? Name one thing. She sputtered, her mouth opening and closing. Jason jumped in his voice, rising loud enough that other customers turned to look. We gave you a home. We fed you. We supported you. You did the legal minimum required of parents. You want a medal? I stood up, grabbing my phone. My 20 minutes were almost up anyway. Don't contact me again. Don't come to my office. Don't call me. We're done. Megan stood too, her chair scraping loudly. You're going to regret this, Emily. You're going to regret treating your family this way. I left without another word. My hands were shaking as I walked back to the office, but beneath the trembling was something solid pride. I'd done it. I'd said no. I'd stood my ground. The feeling lasted for approximately 6 hours. My phone started ringing during my drive home. First it was Aunt Patricia, then Uncle George. Then my grandmother Dorothy, who'd helped raise me when I was little, and who I actually loved. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I had 12 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Every single one from a family member I hadn't heard from in months or years. I listened to Dorothy's voicemail with growing horror as I walked up to my apartment. Emily, honey, your mother called me in tears. She said you're making $400,000 a year now, and you refuse to help her when she's struggling. She said she sacrificed everything for you, and you threw it in her face. I'm very disappointed in you. Call me when you're ready to do the right thing. $400,000 I didn't make anywhere near that much. Megan had inflated my salary and twisted the entire encounter. I tried calling Dorothy back to explain, but she didn't answer. I tried texting. Nothing. I spent that night reading through messages from cousins, aunts, uncles, even family friends. Megan had called everyone. She'd spun a story about how she was desperate and struggling, how I'd made it big, and abandoned her, how I'd cruelly refused to help my own mother. No one asked for my side of the story. No one questioned Megan's version. They just believed her the way they always had. I lay in bed that night staring at my ceiling, realizing that standing up to Megan wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to 17 new messages. I stopped reading them after the first 5, all from family members I barely remembered, all telling me I should be ashamed of myself. At work, I tried to focus on my actual job, the one I'd worked so hard to earn, but my phone kept buzzing. I finally turned it to silent and shoved it in my desk drawer. Amanda brought me coffee around 10. She was in her early 20s, sharp as a tack, and I'd recommended her for a raise just last month. She set the cup down carefully and hesitated. "Everything okay?" "You seem stressed." I managed a smile. "Family stuff, nothing I can't handle." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. I didn't blame her. I probably looked like I'd been hit by a truck. That afternoon, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. I rarely used it anymore, but something made me log in. Maybe I wanted to see how far Megan had spread her poison. The answer was far. Very far. Megan hadn't named me directly in her posts, but she didn't need to. "Heartbroken today," she'd written. "You sacrifice everything for your children, and this is how they repay you." Some people forget where they came from the moment they get a little success. Praying for guidance and strength. The post had 63 comments, all sympathetic. People I'd known my whole life were commenting about ungrateful children and how parents deserve better. Several people had shared the post. Jason had posted too, less subtle than Megan. "Can't believe some people think they're too good for their own family now. Money changes people, I guess." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to comment and tell everyone the truth, but I knew how it would look. Attacking my own mother on social media would only make me seem worse. I closed the app and threw my phone back in the drawer. Over the next week, the assault continued. More calls, more messages. Megan's posts got more frequent and more pointed. She talked about having to choose between groceries and medication. She shared articles about elder abuse and adult children who abandon their parents. Jason started adding details. He posted about how he'd always looked up to me, how he'd been so proud of my success, and how hurt he was that I'd turned my back on the family. None of it was true. Not a single word. But truth didn't matter when Megan and Jason were this good at lying. The worst part was watching family members I actually cared about turn against me. Cousins I'd been close to growing up stopped responding to my messages. My Uncle George, who'd taught me to ride a bike, sent me a long email about family values and responsibility. And Dorothy, my grandmother, the woman who'd bandaged my scraped knees and helped me with my homework, she called again and left another voicemail. "I don't understand you anymore, Emily. The girl I raised would never be this cruel. Your mother is my daughter and she's hurting. If you won't help her, at least have the decency to apologize." That one broke something in me. I loved Dorothy. Her opinion mattered more than all the others combined. I decided to try talking to her face to face. Maybe if I could just show her the truth, she'd understand. She'd always been the reasonable one in the family. I called her back. She answered this time, her voice cold. "I'd like to meet with you, Grandma. Can I take you to lunch this weekend?" A long pause. "I suppose. Saturday at noon. Come to my house." Saturday arrived too slowly and too quickly at the same time. I spent Friday night gathering evidence. Bank statements from my college years showing my student loan payments and deposits from my campus jobs. Emails from professors confirming my scholarship status. Pay stubs from the 2 jobs I'd worked while in school. I put it all in a folder organized and neat. Proof that I'd paid my own way. Proof that Megan's story was a lie. Dorothy lived in the same small house she'd owned for 40 years, about 30 minutes outside the city. I parked on the street and sat in my car for a moment, trying to calm my nerves. She answered the door before I could knock. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. Her gray hair was pulled back in its usual bun, and she wore the cardigan I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. "Come in," she said, no warmth in her voice. We sat at her kitchen table, the same one where she'd helped me with my algebra homework in 8th grade. I slid the folder across to her. "Grandma, please look at these. I need you to see the truth." She opened the folder slowly, her reading glasses perched on her nose. I watched her face as she went through the documents. Her expression didn't change much, but I saw her lips press together when she got to the student loan statements. "These show I paid for everything myself," I said quietly. "Mom and Dad didn't sacrifice for my education. I did. I worked 60-hour weeks between classes and 2 jobs. I ate ramen for dinner most nights because I couldn't afford anything else. I graduated with $43,000 in debt that took me 8 years to pay off." Dorothy set down a bank statement showing a deposit from my job at the campus library. $300 every 2 weeks. "Your mother said she was sending you money every month." "She never sent me a dime, Grandma. I'm not lying. I can show you more if you need it." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the papers. Then she looked up at me and her eyes were softer. Why didn't you tell us this before? Why did you let us think your parents were helping you? Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want anyone to know how hard it was. I hesitated, then added the truth that hurt the most. And because Mom and Jason were always so good at making me look like the bad guy, I figured no one would believe me anyway. Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was papery and warm. I believe you, sweetheart. I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. The relief was so intense I almost cried. Thank you. Thank you for listening. We talked for another hour. I told her everything. About Jason's failed businesses, about the co-signing request, about the $50,000 they'd demanded, about how they'd shown up at my office and then immediately started spreading lies. Dorothy listened to it all, shaking her head. When I finished, she squeezed my hand again. I'll talk to Megan. I'll tell her to stop this nonsense. I should have known it wouldn't work. I should have realized that telling Dorothy the truth would only make things worse. But I was desperate for an ally, so I believed it would help. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in days. Maybe this would blow over. Maybe once Dorothy talked some sense into Megan, everyone would calm down. I was so wrong. On Monday morning, I got to work early. I had a presentation to finish for the board meeting on Wednesday, and I wanted to get ahead of it. The office was quiet at 7:00 a.m., just the way I liked it. I was deep into slide formatting when Amanda knocked on my door around 8:30. Emily, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's someone calling for you. He says it's an emergency and he's your brother. My stomach dropped. Tell him I'm not available. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. He's already called 3 times. He sounds really upset. He said something about your mother being in the hospital. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Transfer him to my line. I picked up on the first ring. Jason, what do you want? His voice was tearful, panicked. Emily, thank God. It's Mom. She collapsed this morning. They think it's her heart. I'm at Memorial Hospital and they're saying she needs tests and maybe surgery and I don't know what to do. For one terrible second, I almost believed him. Then I remembered who I was dealing with. Which hospital? Memorial, the one on 8th Street. Can you come, please? Let me make a call. I hung up and dialed Memorial Hospital. It took 3 transfers, but I finally got to the emergency department. Hi, I'm calling to check on a patient. Megan Watson. She would have been brought in this morning with a possible heart condition. The nurse sounded tired. Let me check. A pause. No, sorry. We don't have anyone by that name in the ER or admitted today. Can you double-check? My brother said she collapsed. I'm looking at our system right now. No Megan Watson. Is there another name she might be under? I thanked her and hung up. Jason had lied. Shocking. I was about to block his number when Amanda knocked again, looking even more uncomfortable than before. I'm really sorry, but Mr. Richardson wants to see you in his office. Mr. Richardson was my boss, the chief operating officer. We had a good relationship. He'd been the one to push for my promotion to senior vice president. I walked to his office trying not to panic. Maybe it was about the board presentation. Maybe he wanted to discuss the budget proposals. Marcus Richardson was in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a permanent expression of mild concern. He gestured for me to sit. Emily, I received a concerning phone call this morning. Oh no. Your brother called me directly. He was very upset. He said your mother had a medical emergency and you were refusing to help with the hospital bills. I felt my face get hot. Marcus, that's not true. I just called the hospital. She's not there. She was never admitted. He made it up. Marcus frowned. Why would he make up something like that? And there it was. The question I'd been dreading, because now I had to explain my dysfunctional family situation to my boss. I had to tell him about the money demand, the lies, the harassment. I had to look unprofessional and messy and dramatic. I took a breath and laid it out as calmly as I could. The ambush at the office. The $50,000 demand. Megan's campaign to turn the family against me. Jason's fake emergency. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. That sounds very difficult. I'm sorry you're dealing with it. I'm handling it. It won't affect my work. I know you are. But Emily, I need you to understand something. This company has a reputation to maintain. If your family members are going to be calling here, showing up here, involving the company in personal disputes, that becomes a problem. My chest tightened. I understand. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. See that you do. I value you as an employee, but I can't have this kind of drama disrupting the workplace. I left his office feeling sick. Jason had found a new weapon. He couldn't get to me directly anymore, so he'd go after my career instead. Over the next few days, Jason called the office 6 more times. He varied his stories. Sometimes Mom was sick. Sometimes he needed to reach me about a family emergency. Sometimes he just wanted to talk to his sister. Amanda started looking stressed every time she had to deal with him. I told her to stop putting him through, but he was clever. He'd claim emergency status, say it was urgent, and the receptionist would transfer him before Amanda could stop it. Then he showed up at the building. I was in a meeting when security called my extension. A man claiming to be my brother was in the lobby causing a disturbance. They needed me to come down and sort it out. I excused myself from the meeting and took the elevator down, my heart pounding. Through the glass doors, I could see Jason pacing in the lobby, talking loudly on his phone. Security had positioned themselves nearby, clearly on alert. The moment he saw me, Jason's whole demeanor changed. He looked exhausted, desperate, on the verge of tears. Emily, finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. You need to leave Jason. Now. I just need 5 minutes. Please, it's about Mom. People were staring. Employees I worked with every day were watching this scene unfold. I felt my professional reputation crumbling in real time. There's nothing to discuss. Leave or I'll have security remove you. Jason's expression shifted from desperate to angry. You really are a cold person, aren't you? Our mother is struggling and you hide in your fancy office. Sir, I need you to leave now, one of the security guards said, stepping closer. Jason raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine, I'm leaving, but everyone here should know what kind of person Emily really is. He left, but the damage was done. People were whispering. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked back to the elevator. That afternoon, HR called me in for a meeting. Janet from Human Resources was professional but firm. Emily, we've received reports about a family member causing disruptions. This is the second incident involving security. I need to ask if this is going to continue. I wanted to scream that it wasn't my fault that I was the victim here, but that's not what you say in an HR meeting. I'm taking steps to address the situation. I'm in the process of getting a restraining order. Janet made a note. Good, because we need to ensure the workplace remains professional and safe for all employees. If this continues, we may need to revisit your current position. I left that meeting knowing my promotion was in jeopardy. Everything I'd worked for was at risk because Jason couldn't let go. That night I met with an attorney. Her name was Diane, and she specialized in family law and restraining orders. I told her everything. She listened, took notes, and then looked at me seriously. You have a strong case for a restraining order, especially with the workplace harassment. I can file the paperwork this week, but you need to understand that this might escalate things before it gets better. It can't get worse than this. Diane gave me a look that said I was very, very wrong. We filed the restraining order on Thursday. Jason was served with papers on Friday afternoon. The order prohibited him from contacting me coming within 500 feet of me or visiting my workplace or residence. I informed my building management and office security. I changed my phone number and blocked Megan and Jason on every platform I could think of. I felt like I was finally taking control. Saturday morning, I woke up to an email from Megan. She'd found my work email address on the company website. The subject line read, "How could you?" The email was long, rambling, and full of accusations. I was cruel. I was heartless. I was destroying the family. She was my mother, and I'd betrayed her. I deleted it without responding, but more came. Megan sent me 7 emails that day. Some of them accidentally got forwarded to other people at my company because she was CCing addresses she found on our website, trying to find someone who would listen to her. On Monday, Amanda came to my office looking miserable. "I'm so sorry, but I think you should see this." She showed me her computer screen. Megan had emailed the general info address, and it had been forwarded to Amanda. The email contained a long story about how I'd abandoned my sick elderly mother, complete with embellishments about medical conditions Megan didn't have and financial struggles that were purely fictional. I forwarded everything to Diane, my attorney. She said it could help my case, but also warned me again that things were about to get uglier. She was right. On Tuesday afternoon, I was in my office when Amanda buzzed me. Her voice sounded strange. "Emily, there's a process server here. He needs to see you." My hands went numb. I knew what this was before I even went down there. The process server handed me a thick envelope. Inside were legal documents. Megan was suing me. The lawsuit claimed financial elder abuse and unjust enrichment. It alleged that Megan and my late father, who died 8 years ago from a heart attack, had provided substantial financial support for my education and early career. It claimed they'd given me over $80,000 in loans and gifts with the understanding that I'd repay them once I was financially stable. It demanded $80,000 plus interest. It included what looked like receipts and even a handwritten loan agreement supposedly signed by me when I was 21. None of it was real. The documents were fabricated, but they looked convincing. I stood in the lobby reading through the lawsuit and felt everything spinning. People were walking past me, probably wondering why I looked like I'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus appeared from the elevator, took one look at me, and called me into his office. "Was that a process server?" I couldn't even lie. "Yes, my mother is suing me." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Emily, I need to know. Is this going to affect your ability to do your job?" "No, absolutely not." But we both knew that was already a lie. The legal department would need to be informed because the lawsuit mentioned my employment and salary. HR would want to document everything. My reputation in the company was taking hit after hit. I left work early that day, something I never did. I drove to Diane's office and showed her the lawsuit. She read through it carefully, her expression getting grimmer with each page. "This is fraud. These documents are clearly fabricated, but fighting it is going to be expensive and time-consuming." "How expensive?" She quoted me a number that made my savings account cry. But what choice did I have? I signed the retainer agreement and left her office feeling like I was drowning. Megan had found the perfect weapon. She couldn't beat me with guilt or family pressure, so she'd gone legal. The lawsuit consumed everything. I spent my evenings with Diane going through every document, every claim, every line of Megan's fictional narrative. We built a defense piece by piece, gathering proof that I'd paid for my own education. But proof costs money. Getting official transcripts with scholarship records, obtaining old bank statements, tracking down former employers who could verify my work history. Every piece of evidence came with a fee. My savings account, which I'd built up carefully over 8 years, was evaporating. Between Diane's legal fees and the costs of gathering evidence, I'd burned through $12,000 in 3 weeks. Megan's attorney, meanwhile, was aggressive. His name was Robert, and he filed motion after motion. He wanted access to my financial records, claiming I was hiding assets. He wanted depositions from my current employer about my salary and benefits. He requested documentation of every major purchase I'd made in the past 5 years. The stress started showing at work. I missed a deadline on a client report, something I'd never done before. In a leadership meeting, I lost my train of thought halfway through presenting a budget proposal. Marcus kept glancing at me with an expression that was part concern, part doubt. My coworkers started treating me differently. Not overtly, but I noticed. Conversations would pause when I walked into the break room. People were careful around me, like I might shatter. I probably looked like I might. One Thursday afternoon, Marcus called me into his office again. My heart sank before I even sat down. "Emily, I want to be direct with you. Your performance has slipped. The Maxwell report was 2 days late. You've seemed distracted in meetings. I'm worried about whether you're able to handle the responsibilities of your current position." The words hit like a physical blow. This was my career. Everything I'd worked for, the promotion I'd earned through late nights and weekend work and proving myself over and over again. "I understand your concern. I promise my personal situation won't continue to affect my work." Marcus looked genuinely sympathetic, which somehow made it worse. "I want to believe that, but I have to think about what's best for the company. Let's revisit this conversation in 2 weeks. I need to see improvement." 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to save my career while fighting a fraudulent lawsuit and dealing with Megan's ongoing harassment. I threw myself into work with desperate energy. I stayed late every night. I came in early every morning. I triple-checked every report, every email, every presentation. But the legal battle kept pulling me away. Diane needed me for depositions. We had to prepare responses to Megan's discovery requests. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing that I had to attend. At home, I barely slept. When I did, I had nightmares about losing everything. My job, my apartment, my entire life collapsing because Megan couldn't let me live in peace. 3 weeks into the lawsuit, life had become a blur of legal documents, sleepless nights, and anxious days at the office. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. I took the day off work, which Marcus noted with a tight expression that said more than his polite, "See you Monday." I met Diane at the courthouse an hour early. We sat in the hallway reviewing our strategy while the smell of floor polish and anxiety filled my nostrils. Remember, Diane said Judge Williams tends to be sympathetic to elder concerns, but she hates time wasters. Stay calm, answer directly, and don't let Robert provoke you. Megan arrived 15 minutes before the hearing dressed for the part in a conservative gray dress that made her look older and frailer than she was. Jason walked beside her, miraculously clean-shaven and wearing a suit I'd never seen before, probably rented for the occasion. Robert, their attorney, carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive, but worn like everything about him was calculated to project authority on a budget. Megan caught my eye and gave me a look that was pure satisfaction. She thought she had me cornered. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. When Judge Williams entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, we all rose. Robert presented their case first. He painted Megan as a devoted mother who'd sacrificed everything for her ungrateful daughter. He showed the fake receipts, the forged loan agreement. He had Megan testify about how hard she and my father had worked to support my education. Megan cried on the stand. Real tears this time, I think. She was a good actress when she wanted to be. We just wanted to help our daughter, she said, her voice breaking. We never expected her to turn her back on us when we needed her most. I sat there listening to her as my fingernails digging into my palms. Diane squeezed my arm, reminding me to stay calm. Then it was our turn. Diane presented the bank records showing my student loan payments. She showed deposits from my campus jobs. She had a professor from my college testify via video about my scholarships. But the judge looked skeptical. Family law cases are messy and judges hate them. Without clear evidence of fraud, many judges will try to push for settlement. Ms. Watson, the judge said, addressing me directly, have you considered trying to reach a compromise with your mother? Your Honor, I can't afford to pay money I don't owe for expenses that never happened. The judge sighed. I'm going to order mediation. You two will sit down with a neutral mediator and try to work this out. Court date in 60 days if mediation fails. Mediation. Sitting in a room with Megan and Jason while a stranger tried to make us compromise. The thought made me sick. After the hearing, Diane and I stood outside the courthouse. She looked frustrated. Judges always want family cases to settle. He doesn't want to deal with this. What do? We prepare for mediation. We gather more evidence. And we hope Megan makes a mistake. I drove back to work for an afternoon of meetings I couldn't focus on. That night I got home to find an envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside was a letter from Adult Protective Services. Someone had filed a complaint claiming I was financially exploiting and threatening my elderly mother. A social worker would be contacting me to schedule an investigation interview. I called Diane immediately, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. They filed an APS complaint. They're investigating me for elder abuse. Diane swore, which she never did. This is retaliation for the restraining order and your defense in the lawsuit. It's a pressure tactic. Will it work? Not if you cooperate fully with the investigation. Be honest. Provide documentation. Show them the lawsuit is fraudulent. She paused. But Emily, this means you're now under investigation. That's going to come up if anyone checks your background. My career, my reputation, everything was crumbling. 2 days later, I logged into Facebook to find that Megan had given an interview to a local news station. The story was about adult children who abandoned their elderly parents. Megan didn't name me, but she told enough details that anyone who knew us would recognize the story. My daughter makes a 6-figure salary, Megan said to the camera, tears streaming down her face. And I'm struggling to pay for my medication. I don't understand how children can turn their backs on the parents who raised them. The news station posted the video online. Within hours, it had been shared 300 times. Comments flooded in, all sympathetic to Megan. Someone at my company saw it. I know because Janet from HR called me first thing Monday morning. Emily, we need to talk. I went to her office, my stomach churning. Marcus was there too. So was someone from the legal department I'd never met before. Is this you? Janet asked, showing me the news video on her computer. That's my mother. She's lying. The lawsuit is fraudulent. I'm defending myself. Marcus looked pained. Emily, we value you, but this has become too much. The lawsuit, the harassment, the Protective Services investigation, now media coverage. We need to protect the company's interests. What does that mean? Janet slid a paper across her desk. We're placing you on administrative leave. Paid. while we conduct an internal review to determine if this situation poses a liability to the company. Administrative leave, the kiss of death. Once you're placed on leave, you rarely come back. I looked at Marcus, hoping for some sign that he was on my side. He wouldn't meet my eyes. How long? 2 weeks, initially possibly longer, depending on the outcome of the Protective Services investigation and the lawsuit. I left the building with my personal items in a box like I'd been fired. Security escorted me out. Coworkers stared as I walked past. I sat in my car in the parking garage and finally let myself cry. Everything was gone. My career, my reputation, my savings, my apartment. Megan had destroyed my entire life in less than 2 months, and I had no idea how to fight back anymore. The next 2 weeks were the worst of my life. I spent my days in my apartment, which I'd soon be evicted from, staring at my computer screen. Job listings all required background checks. Any check would show the APS investigation and the lawsuit. No one would hire me. The Adult Protective Services social worker, a woman named Grace, came to interview me. She was professional but distant. I showed her everything: the bank records, the lawsuit documents, the timeline of Megan's harassment. Grace took notes but gave me no indication of what she was thinking. We'll be interviewing your mother as well, and other family members. The investigation will take approximately 30 days. 30 days. Another month of this nightmare hanging over my head. Diane was working on the lawsuit defense, but she'd warned me that fighting Megan's fabricated evidence would require expert witnesses. A forensic document examiner to prove the loan agreement was forged. A financial analyst to show the receipts were fake. Each expert cost thousands of dollars I didn't have. I looked at my savings account. $4,000 left. My rent was $2,000 a month. Even with administrative leave paying my salary, I was burning through money on legal fees faster than I could earn it. I considered bankruptcy. I researched second jobs. I looked at credit card offers for emergency funds. Every option felt like drowning in a different way. Jason, meanwhile, had gotten creative with his harassment. He couldn't contact me directly because of the restraining order, but he'd found ways around it. Fake social media accounts sent me friend requests. Anonymous emails arrived daily. Someone kept calling and hanging up. I documented everything like the police officer had told me. Screenshots, timestamps, patterns. I built a folder of evidence, but I didn't know what good it would do. The worst part was the isolation. I'd cut contact with most of my family years ago because of Megan's manipulation. The few relatives I'd stayed close to had turned against me after her smear campaign. I had friends from work, but now I couldn't face them. What would I say? Hi, remember me? The person who got put on leave because my family is insane. I was alone, completely alone, and Megan knew it. The conservatorship papers arrived on a Tuesday morning. I opened the envelope and read the words 3 times before they made sense. Megan was petitioning for emergency conservatorship over me. She claimed I was mentally unstable, a danger to myself, and unable to manage my own affairs. She'd attached statements from Jason and other family members, all claiming they were concerned about my recent erratic behavior. The petition requested that Megan be appointed as my conservator, giving her complete control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. If she won, I would effectively lose my freedom. At 35 years old, I'd be under my mother's control like I was a child or an incapacitated adult. I called Diane in hysterics. This is insane. She can't do this. Unfortunately, she can petition. Whether she'll win is another question. But Emily, we need to take this seriously. Conservatorships are very hard to break once they're in place. What do I do? First, the court will order a psychological evaluation. You'll need to undergo testing to prove you're mentally competent. Second, we fight this aggressively. We show the pattern of harassment. We demonstrate that this is retaliation and manipulation, not genuine concern. The court-ordered evaluation was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Patricia Chen, a court-appointed psychologist, would assess my mental state. I spent the days before the evaluation in a state of panic. What if I seemed too stressed? What if my anxiety made me look unstable? What if Megan's lies had been so effective that even a professional would believe them? The evaluation took 4 hours. Dr. Chen asked hundreds of questions about my childhood, my education, my career, my family relationships. She gave me written tests, puzzles, memory exercises. I told her everything about Megan's manipulation, Jason's harassment, the fabricated lawsuit, the APS investigation, the administrative leave from work. I probably sounded paranoid, like someone who blamed all their problems on their family, but it was all true, and I had evidence to prove it. Dr. Chen was neutral throughout, giving me no indication of her assessment. "I'll submit my report to the court within 10 days, she said at the end. 10 more days of waiting. Meanwhile, Diane hired a private investigator. His name was Frank, and he was expensive, but Diane said we needed him. "We have to show that Megan and Jason have a pattern of fraud and manipulation. We need to dig into their backgrounds, find proof that they're not trustworthy." Frank started with Jason. Within 3 days, he'd uncovered arrest records from 2 other states. Fraud charges. 1 conviction for writing bad checks. 1 pending case for credit card fraud. Jason had a criminal history I'd never known about. Frank also discovered that Megan had recently bought a new car, a brand new SUV financed but purchased just 6 weeks ago. This was interesting because Megan's lawsuit claimed she was destitute and struggling to pay bills. Diane's eyes lit up when she saw that information. "This is good. This shows she has access to credit and can make large purchases. It contradicts her claims of poverty." But before we could use any of this, disaster struck again. Someone, probably Jason using a fake account, posted my home address, phone number, and workplace online. The post claimed I was a scam artist who defrauded elderly people. It encouraged people to expose her and make sure she faces justice. I started receiving threatening phone calls from strangers. Someone threw a brick through my apartment window. The building management called me immediately. "Ms. Watson, this is the final incident. We need you to vacate within 2 weeks. We can't ensure the safety of other residents with this ongoing situation." 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to find a new apartment while unemployed, under investigation, and involved in 2 lawsuits. I spent that night crying on my bathroom floor, wondering how Megan had won so completely. She'd destroyed my career, my home, my reputation, my savings, and now she was trying to take my freedom. I thought about giving up, about calling her and agreeing to whatever she wanted. Maybe if I just gave her some money, she'd leave me alone. But I knew better. Diane was right. Bullies don't stop when you give in. They just push harder. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale. I'd lost weight. I had circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't hide. I looked broken, but I wasn't broken yet. I pulled myself together and made a plan. If Megan wanted to destroy me, I'd go down fighting. I'd use every piece of evidence, every resource, every legal tool available. I called Frank, the investigator. "Dig deeper. I need everything you can find on Megan and Jason. Every lie, every scheme, every piece of fraud. I don't care what it costs." I reviewed all my evidence again. The bank statements, the employment records, the timeline of harassment. And then I noticed something I'd missed before. Jason's social media history, which Frank had collected, showed posts from a vacation in Hawaii. The dates were from 7 years ago, during my junior year of college. That was the same time period Megan claimed to have been sending me monthly checks for living expenses, the same period she claimed to have been sacrificing financially to support my education. But the posts showed Jason and Megan on beaches, at restaurants, on a helicopter tour. I looked closer at the photos. One of them showed Megan raising a cocktail glass. In the background, visible on a receipt on the table, was a date stamp, September 15th, 7 years ago. I pulled up my bank records from that same month. No deposits from Megan, just my paycheck from the campus bookstore and my student loan disbursement. I looked at more of Jason's posts. He tagged locations, fancy hotels, expensive activities. I started researching costs. A 1-week trip to Hawaii, staying at the hotels Jason tagged, would have cost at least $5,000, probably more, like $8,000 with activities and meals. Frank helped me get Megan's credit card records from that period through discovery in the lawsuit. And there it was, over $30,000 in luxury purchases during the 2 years Megan claimed to be struggling to support me through college. New jewelry, weekend trips, a cruise, restaurant bills that exceeded my entire monthly budget. Megan hadn't been sacrificing. She'd been living well while I ate ramen and worked 2 jobs. The day Dr. Chen's report was due to the court, I was a nervous wreck. Diane called me in the afternoon. "The report's in. It's good, Emily. Dr. Chen found you to be mentally competent with no signs of instability. She noted your high levels of stress, but attributed it to the ongoing family conflict, not to any mental health condition." Relief washed through me. "So that kills the conservatorship request." "Not automatically. Megan can still argue that you need protection for other reasons. but this removes their strongest argument. We'd taken one step forward, but we still had a long way to go. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. I'd be fighting for my freedom in front of a judge who'd decide whether I was competent to control my own life. I spent the night before the hearing unable to sleep. I rehearsed what I'd say. I reviewed the evidence over and over. I tried to prepare for every question, every accusation Megan might make. But I couldn't prepare for how I'd feel sitting across from my mother in a courtroom, listening to her try to convince a judge I was mentally unfit. I couldn't prepare for the possibility that she might win. The morning of the hearing, I put on my best suit, navy blue professional, the one I'd worn for my promotion interview. I wanted to look competent, stable, put together. In the mirror, I looked like I was playing dress-up. The suit hung loose on me. I'd lost 15 pounds from stress. My skin looked gray despite makeup. My hands shook as I tried to fix my hair. I looked exactly like someone who might need a conservator. Diane met me outside the courthouse. She took one look at me and grabbed my arm. "Take a breath. You're going to be fine. We have the evidence. The truth is on our side. What if the judge doesn't believe me? Then we appeal. But it won't come to that. Trust me." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Megan sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, Robert. She'd dressed carefully, too. A simple dress, understated jewelry tissues in her hand. She looked like a concerned mother. Jason sat in the gallery behind her, along with 3 other family members I barely recognized. Cousins, I think, all there to support Megan's claims. I had no one, just Diane, and a folder full of evidence. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She looked at Megan with polite attention, then at me with the same. "This is a hearing on an emergency petition for conservatorship," she began. "Ms. Megan Watson is petitioning for conservatorship over her daughter, Ms. Emily Watson, on the grounds of mental incapacity. Let's begin." Robert stood and presented Megan's case. He painted a picture of a daughter in crisis, administrative leave from work, a restraining order against her own brother, strange erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and inability to maintain stable housing. Your Honor, Ms. Watson's own employer found her behavior concerning enough to place her on leave. She's under investigation by Adult Protective Services for elder abuse. She's facing eviction. All signs point to someone who is not capable of managing her own affairs. Then Megan testified. She cried as expected. She talked about how worried she was, how I'd always been unstable, how I'd gotten worse lately, how she'd tried to help, but I'd pushed her away. "I just want to make sure my daughter gets the help she needs," Megan said, dabbing her eyes before she hurts herself or someone else. Jason testified next. He talked about my paranoid delusions that the family was out to get me, my irrational anger, when they tried to have a simple conversation about finances. The family members in the gallery nodded along. To anyone who didn't know the truth, it probably sounded convincing. Then Robert presented the psychological evaluation report. Dr. Chen's report was mostly in my favor. It stated I showed no signs of mental illness, no cognitive impairment, no danger to myself or others. But there was one line that Robert highlighted. Subject displays high levels of stress and anxiety related to family conflict and professional challenges. Robert pounced on that. "Your Honor, this confirms what we're saying. Ms. Watson is experiencing a mental health crisis. She needs help, and her mother is offering that help through conservatorship." When it was Diane's turn, she stood slowly and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a concerned mother. What we have is a pattern of harassment, manipulation, and fraud, and I can prove it." Diane started with the timeline. She showed the judge my bank records from college, proving I'd paid my own way. She showed Megan's credit card statements from the same period documenting luxury spending. While Ms. Megan Watson claimed she was sacrificing to support her daughter's education, she was actually spending thousands on vacations and luxury items. She presented Jason's criminal history. The petitioner's son has 2 fraud convictions and a pending fraud case. This is a family pattern. She showed the fabricated loan documents from Megan's civil lawsuit. These documents have been analyzed by a forensic expert who will testify that they were created recently, not 10 years ago as claimed. She presented the social media harassment evidence, the fake accounts, the threatening posts, my vandalized car and broken window. Ms. Watson isn't unstable. She's under attack. The stress doctor. Chen noted isn't a mental health crisis. It's a normal response to months of coordinated harassment by her mother and brother. Judge Morrison's expression had changed. She was leaning forward now, paying close attention. Diane brought out the vacation photos. Jason on a beach. Megan with her cocktail. Time-stamped and dated exactly when Megan claimed to be sending me money. They're not worried about Ms. Watson's well-being. They're angry she won't give them money. This conservatorship petition is retaliation, pure and simple. Then Diane called me to testify. My legs felt like water as I walked to the stand and was sworn in. Diane asked me gentle questions about my education, my career, my accomplishments, about the $50,000 demand, about the harassment that followed. I answered as calmly as I could, but my voice shook. I looked at Megan while I spoke, and she stared back with an expression I couldn't read. Then Robert cross-examined me. He was aggressive, trying to make me seem angry or unstable. Isn't it true you cut off all contact with your family? I set boundaries with family members who were trying to exploit me financially. You got a restraining order against your own brother, after he harassed me at work and my home repeatedly. You're on administrative leave from your job. Because my family's harassment created a hostile situation my employer had to address. You're about to be evicted. Because someone, likely my brother, posted my address online and encouraged vandalism, making my apartment building unsafe. Robert tried to twist everything, but I'd been through too much. I wasn't going to let him make me look crazy when I was the sane one. When I stepped down, I felt like I'd at least held my ground. Judge Morrison called a short recess. Diane and I sat in the hallway while she reviewed her notes. You did well, Diane said. But judges can be unpredictable in family cases. When we returned, Judge Morrison looked at Megan with a very different expression than before. Ms. Watson, she said to Megan, I've reviewed all the evidence presented today. I've listened to the testimony, and I have serious concerns about this petition. Megan's face went pale. The evidence shows not a daughter in crisis, but a mother engaging in a concerning pattern of behavior. The fabricated documents, the luxury spending during the period you claimed poverty, your son's criminal history, the harassment of your daughter at her home and workplace. Judge Morrison's voice was sharp now. This conservatorship petition appears to be an attempt to control and financially exploit your daughter, not to help her. I'm denying the petition immediately. Relief crashed over me so hard I thought I might faint, but Judge Morrison wasn't done. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into possible perjury and fraud. Ms. Watson, you testified under oath today. Your testimony contradicts significant evidence. That's a serious matter. Megan stood up, her face red. Your Honor, I just wanted to help my daughter. By lying to this court, by fabricating documents, by harassing her until she lost her job and her home. That's not help, Ms. Watson. That's abuse. The judge looked at me. Ms. Emily Watson, I'm sorry you've been put through this. I'm dismissing this petition and issuing a protective order preventing your mother and brother from filing any future conservatorship petitions without significant new evidence of incapacity. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. I sat there stunned as people filed out. Megan and Robert left quickly, Megan's face twisted in anger. Jason followed, shooting me a look of pure hatred. Diane was grinning. That went better than I could have hoped. The DA referral is huge. What happens now? Now we use this win to kill the civil lawsuit. We show that Megan committed perjury, that her documents are fake, that she has a pattern of lying, and we countersue for your legal fees and emotional distress. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Over the next 3 weeks, everything shifted. The district attorney opened an investigation into Megan and Jason. They were both charged with perjury for their testimony. Jason was charged with additional counts related to the harassment and vandalism. Megan's civil lawsuit fell apart. Her lawyer, Robert, withdrew from the case once the perjury charges were filed. No other attorney would take on a case based on fabricated evidence. The judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice, meaning Megan couldn't refile. Better yet, the judge ordered Megan to pay my legal fees, over $40,000. Adult Protective Services closed their investigation after reviewing the court transcripts. They found no evidence of abuse and noted that the complaint appeared to be retaliatory. The news station that had run Megan's sob story issued a correction after Diane sent them the court records. They'd been manipulated, and they weren't happy about it. My employer called me in for a meeting. Marcus looked embarrassed. Emily, we owe you an apology. We reviewed all the court documents. It's clear you were the victim here, not the problem. We'd like to bring you back if you're willing. I was willing more than willing. They reinstated me with back pay for the time I'd been on leave. They offered me a seat on a new committee developing policies for employees facing harassment. They even issued an internal memo explaining that I'd been wrongly placed on leave and that the company supported me. My reputation at work wasn't just restored, it was enhanced. People who'd avoided me now stopped by my office to apologize or offer support. I was the person who'd stood up to family abuse and won. Some family members reached out to apologize. My grandmother Dorothy cried on the phone. "I should have believed you from the start. I knew your mother could be manipulative, but I never thought she'd go this far. Can you ever forgive me?" I could. Dorothy had been manipulated just like everyone else. We started having dinner every Sunday, rebuilding our relationship. Other family members never apologized. They still believed Megan's lies, or they'd chosen sides and wouldn't admit they'd been wrong. I cut them out of my life completely. I was done with people who wouldn't believe me. Megan and Jason both pleaded guilty to reduced charges to avoid trial. Jason got 2 years probation and had to pay restitution. Megan got probation and was ordered to have no contact with me for 5 years. The court also ordered them to pay my legal fees. They'd never have that kind of money, but knowing they were legally obligated felt like justice. 6 months after the conservatorship hearing, I was sitting in my new apartment, a bright 2-bedroom place with actual sunlight and a building manager who didn't threaten to evict me. I'd rebuilt my savings. My career was thriving. I'd even started dating someone, a kind man named Andrew, who worked in finance and thought my family drama made me strong, not damaged. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. I thought a lot about what I'd learned through that nightmare. About boundaries and self-worth and standing up for yourself even when it cost you everything. I learned that giving in to bullies doesn't make them stop. It just teaches them that bullying works. Every time I tried to accommodate Megan or Jason in the past, they'd just pushed for more. It wasn't until I stood firm and said no that things changed. I learned that people who truly love you will believe you and support you. Dorothy came around when she saw the evidence. My real friends stood by me even when things looked bad. The people who abandoned me based on Megan's lies weren't people I needed in my life anyway. I learned that documentation matters more than emotional manipulation. Megan was a master at playing the victim, at crying on cue, at making people feel sorry for her. But in court, evidence beat emotion every time. My bank statements and employment records told the truth better than any tearful testimony. I learned that standing up for yourself sometimes means standing alone. There were weeks when I had no one on my side except my attorney. When my entire family believed Megan's lies, when I questioned whether I was crazy to keep fighting. But being alone temporarily was better than being controlled forever. I learned that my worth isn't determined by my family's acceptance. For years, I'd carried guilt about cutting contact with Megan and Jason. I'd wondered if I was a bad daughter, a bad sister. But blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to exploit or abuse you. Family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. The therapy helped with that realization. After everything settled, I started seeing a counselor named Dr. Sarah, who specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand that what Megan and Jason did was emotional abuse and financial exploitation. That setting boundaries wasn't cruel, it was healthy. That I had every right to protect myself. Work became a place I actually enjoyed again without the constant stress of harassment. I could focus on my job. I got promoted again 6 months after returning, this time to Executive Vice President. Marcus told me I'd earned it not just through my work performance, but through my grace under pressure. "You handled an impossible situation with professionalism," he said. "That's the kind of leadership we value." My relationship with Andrew grew slowly. He knew everything about my past, all the ugly details, and he didn't run. On our 6th date, I told him about the conservatorship hearing, and he just held my hand. "You survived that," he said. "You're stronger than you think." I still got letters from Megan sometimes. The post office forwarded them from my old address. I recognized her handwriting on the envelopes. I threw them away unopened. I had no interest in whatever manipulation she was attempting now. Jason tried to friend me on a new social media account once. I blocked it immediately and reported it to his probation officer. He was supposed to have no contact. I wasn't giving him any chances to start the harassment again. Some nights I still had anxiety dreams about that period, about losing my job, my apartment, my freedom. I'd wake up in a panic thinking I heard Jason in the hallway or that another lawsuit had arrived. But then I'd remember where I was, safe, free, in control of my own life. I kept a photo on my desk at work. It was from my college graduation 8 years ago. I'm wearing my cap and gown, holding my diploma, standing alone. Megan and Jason hadn't come to the ceremony. They'd said they were busy. Looking at that photo used to make me sad. The girl in it looked so alone, so uncertain about her future. But now when I looked at it, I saw something different. I saw strength. That girl had put herself through college with no help. She'd earned every credit hour, every scholarship, every dollar in her paycheck. She'd done it alone because she had to, and she'd been strong enough to keep going. I was proud of her. I was proud of me. One Sunday dinner with Dorothy, she asked me if I'd ever forgive Megan. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back in your life. It just means letting go of the anger. I wasn't there yet. I was still angry sometimes. Angry about the months of hell Megan had put me through. Angry about the legal fees and the lost time and the damage to my reputation. Angry that she'd never apologized or admitted what she'd done. But I was working on it. The anger was fading slowly, replaced by something closer to pity. Megan was 70 years old and she'd burned every bridge. She'd alienated her daughter, damaged her relationships with extended family, and earned herself a criminal record. She'd destroyed her credibility and her reputation, all because she couldn't let go of her need to control me. Jason would probably never change. He'd move on to his next scheme, his next victim, but he wouldn't be coming after me again. The restraining order and probation had teeth. If he violated them, he'd go to jail. I thought about sending Megan a letter once, telling her how much she'd hurt me, asking why she'd done it. But I knew I'd never get a real answer. People like Megan don't have insight into their own behavior. She probably genuinely believed she was the victim in this story. So I didn't write the letter. I just moved forward. The company committee on workplace harassment policies turned out to be meaningful work. We developed protocols for employees facing external harassment that affects their work. Guidelines for HR on how to support employees rather than treating them as liabilities. Training for managers on recognizing when someone is a victim rather than a problem. I helped write those policies thinking about my own experience. How terrifying it had been when Marcus questioned my commitment. How humiliating it was to be put on administrative leave. How close I'd come to losing everything because my employer saw me as a drama source rather than an employee under attack. Maybe my experience could help someone else avoid the same pain. I also started volunteering with a legal aid organization that helped people fight fraudulent conservatorship cases. What had happened to me happened to other people too. Sometimes family members tried to take control for financial gain. Sometimes it worked, and the victim lost their freedom for years. I wanted to help prevent that. I spoke at workshops about warning signs. I helped review cases. I donated money to help people afford the legal representation they needed. Turning my trauma into something helpful felt like taking back power. So if you're out there facing something similar, if you have family members who try to manipulate or exploit you, if you're wondering whether you're wrong to set boundaries or cut contact, let me tell you this. You're not wrong. You're protecting yourself. And that's not just your right. It's your responsibility. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing your own well-being over their demands. Don't let anyone convince you that standing up for yourself makes you the bad person. And don't ever let anyone take your freedom without a fight. You're worth fighting for. Your life is worth protecting. And you're stronger than anyone who tries to tear you down. I know because I lived through it. And if I can make it to the other side, so can you.